case, the petitioner will go first because he has the burden, because he's the person who filed the motion, to show by a preponderance of the evidence why he needs a protective order in place, meaning that there have been acts of family violence that have been committed, and there's a reasonable likelihood of acts of family violence in the future without that this order could protect him from. And the definition of what are acts of family violence are everything from criminal trespass to any felony. And so simple assault, simple battery, there's lots of different things. So I'll be looking at all of those legal definitions to determine and apply the law to the facts that are presented today to make my determination. Once the petitioner testifies, if he chooses, the respondent will have a chance to ask specific factual questions, which is called cross-examination, of him if she chooses through me. I will ask the question, so there won't be any back and forth directly. Also, the respondent will have a chance to present her case and testify herself. And so she may or may not have questions during the initial part. Once the petitioner's case is concluded, the respondent will have the chance, as I said, to testify if she wishes. The petitioner will have a chance to ask questions through me if he wishes to ask any factual questions about what has been testified to. And then the same will happen with any witnesses that the respondent has. And then once all of that is concluded, I will determine whether there has been enough evidence presented by a preponderance of the evidence to support the extension of the order for 12 months. Okay. And there won't be any interruption of each other. So we'll keep each other party muted to keep down any background noise while the other party is talking. And I just ask the parties to please try to remain as civil as possible during this proceeding so each party can be heard. All right. So at this point, sir, how do you know the respondent, Rita Yolanda Huey?
She's my biological daughter.
All right. And this is usually impolite to ask, but may I ask you how old you are?
I'm 77.
Okay, thank you. And she's your adult biological daughter, correct?
Yes.
And how long has it been since y'all lived in the same residence?
It's been over 20 years.
Why did you file this petition? Well, let me ask you this. Do you know that she lives in DeKalb County?
Yes.
Okay. And why did you file this petition for protection?
I have it summarized on the sheet that I sent to the court. My wife, Vivian, died on June 8th of this year, 2023. And I had made arrangements for the Ontropolis funeral home to pick her remains up the next day to do the embalming and prepare the funeral arrangements. Well, the next day I got a call from the DeKalb medical examiner saying that someone had called them and told them that I had possibly murdered my wife. And I found out later that it was my daughter that called them. And as a result of that, the medical examiner would not release my wife's body to the undertaker. It disrupted all the funeral arrangements and plans for 4 or 5 days. And the medical examiner was basically saying they were going to do a full autopsy because they, I guess, believed what the respondent had stated. Well, about 4 days later, after they had done a full autopsy, they concluded that my wife died of a massive heart attack influenced by diabetes and hypertension. Her heart stopped suddenly. Well, my daughter, when I was at the hospital with my wife's remains, I was there with my granddaughter, which is her daughter, her oldest daughter, Takaya. And she called over there while we were standing over her remains, accusing Takaya of engaging in some kind of conspiracy to cover up what had happened to my wife, that we had done something to her and were trying to cover it up. That was the first thing. And then secondly, while we were trying to prepare for her funeral, family members called me and told me that she had posted stuff out there on social media. And some of the things on social media was, from what they told me, was that I not only had killed my wife, but I had been abusing my wife for several years. I'd been beating her, and all of that was untrue. And also, word got back to me that she had planned to come to the funeral and disrupt the funeral by making those same allegations in public. And so that was why I really initially initiated this petition, because I was asking the court to prevent her from coming to the funeral. But this petition was not really acted upon until after the funeral.
So has she made any threats towards you?
She made one. That was, if you look at that, that was a police report. I think it's in your file, when she called the police out here, and she had made a recording of her daughter was, and the police came out here and spent about 3 hours out here investigating whether or not I had abused or beat my wife. And they spent 3 hours out here that night, and she was out there in the police wouldn't let her come to the house, but she was out there in the street about 100 feet away from my house for 2.5 hours, just yelling and screaming and cursing and calling me all kind of names and making accusations of me. Some I could hear and some I couldn't hear. Well, a police officer stayed out here for 3 hours. They even called their supervisor out here. They made me leave my wife's room. They went and examined my wife from head to toe, talked to her, and they didn't see any signs of abuse or bruise on her anywhere. I thought it was over. Then the next day, 2 more police officers knocked on my door saying they were coming out here for the same thing, that somebody had called them again about the abuse. And this time there were about 10 people out there in the cul-de-sac. Many of them were family members. They came out here because they had said I had been abusing my wife. And they were coming out here, making accusations, was ready to do what was necessary. Even my stepson had heard about it, and he was saying, telling my other son that if I find out about this and this is true, y'all gonna lose a dad. That's how this thing had inflamed. And my stepson was.
Let me stop. That's what your stepson said, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Because he heard this stuff from that Rita had been saying.
Okay.
And he came down too. I don't know whether he had his gun with him.
Did anybody say she said to tell you something, or these are just things they're saying they heard her say?
These are things they said. The only thing Rita said to me, a person, where Rita came out here the second time too, with the police officer and all those people out there in the cul-de-sac, and she was yelling and cursing. And 3 or 4 times she told me, "You're dead, you're dead." And she was accusing me of abusing my wife and told me you were dead. And so I went in and told the police officer, and the police officer told me the video. She said, "Well, you got your cell phone? Just go out there and videotape and record what she's saying." Well, I went out there and started recording, but I didn't get the part she was dead, but I got all the others. And then the police officer walked out there. I told them that she's out here threatening me. When they walked outside and started walking to the cul-de-sac to the other people, she got in her car and left. And so that's when some of the other family members called me and said that she was planning on coming to the funeral and disrupt the funeral and make those accusations in public. This is what I initially petitioned the court about. I didn't want her coming there and disrupting my wife's funeral because my wife didn't deserve that.
And I understand that, but the purpose of it is to prevent, to be protection for your safety. Were you in fear for your safety at this time?
Yes, I did. I had to hire a private security guard to come to the funeral, and I called the DeKalb Police Department and explained to them what was going on, and asked them if they would have somebody there at the funeral to make sure that nothing happened to me or anybody else there. And the detective told me, he said, since that was private property, he said, we couldn't come. And he said, but we'll be on standby. He said, if you call us, we'll be there in a few minutes and make arrests of anybody disrupting that funeral. And so we had to pay the security guard $400 just come in and stand there to guarantee that there would be no disruption at my wife's funeral. And also, since because of the delay, I couldn't have my wife buried on the same day. That we had the funeral on a Saturday. And since she was being buried at the Georgia National Cemetery, we had to wait till that Monday to have her interred because they don't do burials on Saturday and Sunday at that cemetery. So it really just disrupted the funeral all the way around. And we also had just a security guard on standby to come to the repast because I didn't know, what her intent was or how she had planned to do that. So I just had to do that just for not only my protection, but for the people that were attending the funeral.
Other than the comments you're saying she made when she was outside at the at the residence? Has she had any further communications with you?
Not since these protect orders. No, she has not communicated or tried to contact me at all. The only thing that she's made reference to me on social media, I've seen some references about me, but personally, she has not contacted me, called me, and she has not come back to my residence again. But she did go to my granddaughter's residence, which I'm on the lease at that property on. And my granddaughter called me and told me that she was outside, and I told her not to open the door and let her in.
But you don't
And
live
so-
at that residence, right?
I don't live there, but I'm on the lease there.
Okay. Okay. And that's a distinction for,
Yes, I'm frequently over there, and I was just thinking about the possibility that I could run into her over there because I go over there quite frequently. And I
okay.
just didn't want, and I just don't want to run into her. And the only two places I would possibly run into her is if she came to my home again, or I ran into her over there, because I don't go around her home. I don't go anywhere that she would probably be. So
Has she made any threats to you before?
Not that I can call directly, but she's, said a lot of disrespectful. I can't recall any specific words that she said. She may have, but I know she's cursing me out and been very disrespectful to me for over the last 20 years. That's why I stay away from her. And she has a hatred of me. I don't know what is fueling it, but she's had a hatred of me even before this. She's just been very hateful and disrespectful to me. After all I've spent thousands of dollars on her and her children. I practically bankrupted myself trying to help her family. And I don't know why she hates me so much. So at this point, I said this was the last straw. I said, she hates me so much and want nothing to do with me. I just said, I'm just going to cut all ties and just leave her alone from this point on. And that's why I wanted to protect her. I just don't want her to come around me anymore because she hates me, wants nothing to do with me. Well, I said, I can live the rest of my life and I'll pass and don't have to cross if that's the way she feels.
All right. Okay. Anything else you want the court to know about why you filed for this? And
Well, one last thing is, her granddaughter made that recording, but see, her granddaughter was at my house because of some violence between her granddaughter and her. They got in some kind of altercation at her house, and my granddaughter called me late at night saying she wouldn't let her out of the house, let her get her shoes and things. And so she came over here with no shoes on to my house, and that's why her daughter was staying with me because she had to leave home. And so that was, and she was arrested for that. Well, one of my sons told me that she believed that I had her arrested.
okay, so we can't get into too much. We need some witnesses. We can't get into too much of people saying what someone else said.
Well, that's what I'm just letting her know that I didn't have her arrested. She was arrested, but I had nothing to do with it. And so if she believes that, I had nothing to do with it.
Okay, and are you in fear that if this order does not stay in effect, are you in fear for your safety in the future?
If she comes back to my house, yes, because the way she behaved the last two times she come out, it's unpredictable what she might do.
Okay.
And she's been, it was my understanding she's been known to have carry a firearm. That was my concern.
All right. You said 2 times. What was the other time? You told me about the time you said she was yelling out there for hours saying you're dead. What was the other time?
No, she was out there yelling. It was the next day. See, that was 2 consecutive incidents. She came that night. See, the police officer came out here twice. They came out here that night from about 12 to 3 o'clock. She was out there screaming and yelling. And then for some reason, she called the police again the next day. They came out again. 2 more officers came out the next day investigating the same things of abuse of my wife. And this time, I don't know whether she did it or somebody else, but about 8 or 10 family members came out there with her, and they were all out in the cul-de-sac, and some of them came in angry like they had believed what they had found out through her.
Did she say anything that day?
That was the day when she told me I was dead.
Okay, so the day before when she came out, did she say anything?
Well, she was like I said, the police officer kept her. I could hear her yelling and cursing, but I couldn't hear exactly the exact word. But she yelled and cursed out there for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, nonstop, all while the police officers were here.
And the police officers were keeping people separated?
I guess they told her to stay up there, not to come into the yard.
Okay. All right. All right. Ms. Huey, this is your chance. If you have any questions specifically about what's been testified to, you'll have a chance to testify if you wish, and to let the court know what you feel about the allegations. But this is just any specific factual questions you would like me to ask him about what's been testified to.
I don't have any questions, Your Honor. I will,
Okay.
will wait.
Okay, thank you. All right. So, sir, do you have any other witnesses or any other evidence you want the court to consider?
The only thing I sent was I sent a copy of that text message that was posted. I sent that to the court.
Okay.
And and the only other witness I could have was whatever the police officer wrote in their reports when they came out.
Okay.
There were two police reports written up.
So, Madam Clerk, could you pull up, let's see, it sounds like he said that if they have filed a couple, he submitted some police reports and a text.
Any police reports?
Okay. All right.
I got
well,
the case number.
No, so we're separate from the police department. As a judge, I only consider evidence if and when it comes in during a hearing.
Okay.
Now, I show something that shows a jail view.
Okay.
You want to see that?
I'm
not sure. If that's
I'm not sure if that's relevant to.
Yes, that was Rita's jail view. Somebody sent that to me. That was when she was arrested. And that was posted. They posted her picture and what the charges were against her.
But that doesn't have anything to do with you specifically, correct?
No, other than that, it explains why her daughter was over here at my house.
Okay, so that's not necessarily relevant to whether she's committed acts of family violence against you.
Oh, yeah, she didn't do anything to me.
Okay,
No.
okay, all right. Is there anything else, Ms. Broom, in there?
Oh, just his statement.
Okay, and that I have to have the live testimony anyway, so you've told me what you want me to know. So okay, all right, thank you. All right, ma'am, at this point, you've heard the allegations. You are welcome to testify and tell the court what you want the court to know about what's been testified to.
Yes, ma'am. This TPO, a false TPO against me, and the previous false TPO against me from May 16th is all stemming from an adult protective service case established for my mother on April 26th of this year, literally 2-3 months ago.
Okay, I'm going to pause 1 second. I do see that there was a previous TPO filed in this case that was dismissed on the petitioner's motion.
Yes.
Did that come before a judge at a 12-month hearing?
Yes, we did see a judge.
All right. So, I have one more question for the petitioner. Sir, could you please unmute for me?
Yes.
So on that day, it looks like there was already a petition and an ex parte issued, and it sounds like it came before a judge and was dismissed on your motion and the respondent was present.
Yes.
Can you tell me why you refiled?
Because as I said, when I filed the first one, when I met with the judge that day, he asked me if there was any way that I felt that I could resolve this without it going any further. And so at that point, I didn't want, he was saying that my daughter would have to go to those classes and things. And at this point, I thought, she had probably had a time to reflect. And so I just said, well, I'm willing to let it go. That's what I was saying. I said, well, I'm extending the olive branch. I'm just going to drop it because I didn't want anything else to happen to her or for anything to go any further if we could just resolve this peacefully. And that's why I dropped it. But,
so why did you restart it?
Because that's, like I said, when she called Lana to that, the medical examiner often accused me of murdering my wife, said those inflammatory things that I had been abusing my wife, had said that she was going to come to the funeral and let everybody know what I had done to my wife. That's when I got it reinstated. And I called the court. I was asking the court, there was any way to keep her from coming to the funeral because family members had told me she was going to come and disrupt the funeral. So the second protective order primarily was to keep her from coming to the funeral.
Okay, so I'm going to go back and look. So the threats you were talking about when she came to your house, that was the first petition.
Yes.
So you filed the second one to keep her from going to the funeral.
Yes. Okay. And the threat she had made on social media.
What were, when you say threat on social media, was it threats to harm you?
Or
was it more slander?
Let me rephrase
Hold on,
that.
let me say, because I'm having, and the reason I'm asking these questions is not to discount anyone's experience at all. Like I said, I have to determine from the facts that I'm legal, I have to look at the facts under the law that guides me on this specific process. And sometimes things may be slander or libel, but they may not be a threat.
Yes.
And so that's what I'm at. So you're saying when she was posting things about you on social media?
They were allegations. Let me rephrase that right.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Allegations, false allegations. Not
Okay.
threats, they were allegations.
Okay.
And you have a copy of one of them in the file I sent to the court. One of the allegations that was posted online.
Okay. Ms. Broom, do you have anything there?
Sorry, which evidence?
He said there's allegations of something posted online. Is that was
Okay, the
that
social media?
Yeah.
Yes, social.
Okay, yes. Okay.
All right. So where did you see this?
Yes, I saw it, and I had somebody sent it to me. I saw that one, and there was another one I saw on TikTok that I couldn't copy. There was one on TikTok was similar to that, and they were asking people to please help and assist us with my mother. And so I saw this one, and I saw one on TikTok. And so some of the others said they had seen some others. Because see, I'm not a participant on a Facebook, and so the people were telling me because I don't have access to those Facebook accounts because I don't engage in social media. And so it was people who were on social media, relatives and things, were calling me or texting me, telling me what was being said out there.
Okay. And this was one post?
It was that's the one I got, but there was two that I saw personally, that one and another one on TikTok.
That someone showed you?
Yes. No, I saw it myself, yes. Or
Okay.
they told me about it, and I found it.
You were able to see it? Okay.
Yes.
And those are the two that you are aware of?
Those are the two that I personally saw myself.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay. That clears things up for me a little bit. And part of that will go into my determination about whether there's a history, prior acts and reasonable fear going forward and whether there have been acts committed. So, okay. All right. So ma'am, we will go back to you. So y'all came before a judge, it was dismissed, and then there was a refiling recently. So go ahead and tell me what you want me to know.
Yes, ma'am. That evidence that the petitioner just showed or that you just put up, ma'am, that is not a social media post. That was a direct text message that I sent my brother who lives and resides in Texas. Okay. That was a direct message I sent to my brother's cell phone after my brother texted me. That is not a social media post. I haven't posted anything on any social media, including Facebook, since 2019.
Okay. Okay.
The TikTok, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. The TikTok is what my daughter, I have 4 daughters total. The TikTok post that the petitioner is referring to, that's what my daughter, one of my daughters posted onto TikTok on her account. I don't post on social media.
Okay. All right. And in general, what would you like the court to know about the allegations?
The allegations are false. This is all because of an adult protective service case that was taken out for my mother again on April 26th, 2023. Now, 3 days prior to me calling, because I'm the one that called and reported elder abuse of my mother, because 3 days prior on April 23rd, that was a Sunday, April 23rd, my mother was being abused by the petitioner. There is a recording of the petitioner and my mother, both of their voices, and my mother can be heard being abused. My mother can be heard screaming, help, help, please help me.
Okay. So I'm going to pause you here and I'm going to let y'all know because I'm just trying to focus in. So I understand you're alleging that your mother was abused. That's and you may have evidence of that. I'm not here to determine whether that's true or not. I'm just determining whether you've committed any acts of family violence against your father. So alleging someone has done something on its own is not an act of family violence. Threatening someone is. And so I do appreciate, and I'll let you give me the background, but I don't need to get into all the details of whether there was abuse committed against your mom or not. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
But go ahead from there, having that in mind.
The reason I'm stating that is because, ma'am, is because that's why we were there at his house, at my mother's and his residence on April 23rd. That's why the police was called. I called the police. The petitioner is lying. I called the police because my daughter sitting here, Paris, was inside their residence because the abuse was happening. So that's why I called the police. to come and get my daughter, my 17-year-old daughter, out of that residence where the abuse was happening that night on April 23rd. And 3 days after that, that's when I took out an adult protective service case, trying to follow the letter of the law to get my mother help. That's why I'm saying all of this. This is where this stems from. If I would have never called the police, if I would have never gone to get my daughter and have law enforcement meet me there, and the police did not keep me back. I chose to stay back. I even intentionally, I arrived there before law enforcement got there, but his security cameras won't pick that up because I waited in the cul-de-sac before their cul-de-sac, because I've known my father all my life. I know how he operates. And so I waited for law enforcement, for that law enforcement vehicle to arrive. And then I followed law enforcement to my parents' residence so that he could not come in a situation like this and lie on me.
So I'm a little confused at that. So the time, I thought this was after your mother had passed. Did she not?
No, ma'am.
When the police came out and he's saying you alleged you're dead, he's saying that was being shouted?
Yes, that's the incident. That's what happened. That's the only reason why this TPO, both TPOs was taken out on me, because on April 23rd, one of my 4 daughters was staying at their home not because of any issue between my daughter and myself. It is because 5 days prior to April 23rd, on April 18th, my daughter was in a car accident. And I had to go down to where the accident was, and I contacted the petitioner because the vehicle was in her name. And so that's how this whole interaction between he and I started, was because of my 18-year-old, now 18-year-old, but then 17-year-old daughter's car accident. And so that's why she was staying at their residence, so that he could get sorted out, the property damage and all of that, because the vehicle, my daughter's vehicle, was in his name. That's the only reason she was over there. And so when that happened,
we're not going to have, no head shaking or reactionary expressions, because that's not going to make me believe or disbelieve anyone anymore. Okay. All right. Go ahead, ma'am.
On April 18th, the accident occurred. I called the petitioner. 5 days after that, my daughter on that day, on April 18th, decided, because I asked my daughter there in the presence of the petitioner. Also, my mother was there. She was in the SUV sitting in the vehicle. She never got out. The petitioner, I told my daughter, I asked her whether or not she wanted to come home with me or whether or not she wanted to go over to her grandparents' home, which has been a normal occurrence all of my children's lives. And so I didn't think anything different this time, for him. And I was trying to make it convenient for the petitioner, being that the vehicle was in his name. So that is the reason why, for the record, that my now 18-year-old, then 17-year-old daughter, and she's sitting right here as my witness. And I asked her, do you want to go? Do you want to go with Granny and Papa, or do you want to come home with me? She said she would go with them. And I said, that's fine, because again, the vehicle was in his name, and, she could go because he needed to get things worked out with the proper damage, get it towed. And she also needed to stay that day because he needed to get it towed and everything. And also the insurance was in his name. So I went down there to help her clean out her car and see if she needed medical care. I ended up taking her to the emergency room the following week. But on that day, that's what the petitioner is stating, is referring to, is the reason why my daughter ended up being in his residence. Not because there was anything going on between my daughter and I. Is because she had an accident.
Okay. And so let's get to the incidents when the police were at the house and he's saying you were yelling and threatening him. What can you tell me?
5 days later, yes, ma'am. 5 days later, on April 23rd, which was a Sunday, and it was Sunday evening, it was about 9:30 at night, which is a school night. I had school-age children. Another one of my daughters, again, the 17-year-old daughter was at the petitioner in my mother's home. The other 2 daughters were here in my home. Harris, who was in the petitioner's in my mother's home, called her sister and said that she's scared and that the petitioner was beating and hitting on, physically abusing my mother. And she was scared. Could I call the police? Can I come get her? And so when that daughter came to tell me that, again, at 9:30 p.m. on that Sunday night, April 23rd, that's the only reason why I got dressed. Everyone in my household got dressed. My 2 daughters, remaining daughters that were here, that were here, my boyfriend and myself, we all got dressed because we had already got settled for the evening, got dressed. I called 911 2 to 3 times en route to the petitioners and my mother's address and where my daughter was current at that time inside that residence. And I waited. I pulled inside of their subdivision. I waited for the officer to get there. When I finally saw the officer's vehicle, I flashed him with my headlights, and then I followed the officer's vehicle to their cul-de-sac, and to be sure that I did not violate the petitioner in any way or his address. I even did not even pull into the cul-de-sac because they live in a cul-de-sac. I parked outside of the cul-de-sac just to make sure that I'm dotting I's and crossing T's. And I chose, no officer, no law enforcement officer told me to stay back. I chose to stand and keep myself by my vehicle and try to let them do their job and let them hear the recording, because I know how my father operates. He's a manipulator and he's a deceiver. And it's not to besmirch him, it's the truth and the facts. I know how he operates and I know what he will do in like this incident today. We're here at this hearing. And
Okay, let's keep getting into the facts. I hear what you're saying. You're saying none of this is true. Tell me what happened when y'all got to the house.
When we got to the house and the officers, I let them listen to the recording that my daughter that was with me sent to my phone. Now, the daughter that made the recording that was still inside the residence that was scared was still inside the house. And she was actually on the phone with the daughter that was with me, physically with me outside of the home. And I let I told the officers what happened. I told them there was a recording. My daughter is in the house and that she's afraid. She's hiding in a linen closet. And this is not the first time that my father has done this to my mother. And I'm calling to get my daughter safely escorted out of the house and to get help for my mother. And that's what they supposedly went inside and did.
So did you ever threaten him that day and yell at him?
I was yelling for my mother to let my mother know, because I knew better than to go in the house, not because any officers told me not to go, because I had to do things very carefully and try to follow the letter of the law so nothing could be falsely used against me. So I did yell for my mother to hear me. I let her know that I'm here. I said, Mama, I'm here. We are here. We're here to help you. We're here to try to save you. And I'm sorry, Mama, that this is happening, but we are here. And that's what I was yelling, because I could not go to the door because I chose not to go to the door. I didn't want anything to be twisted around on me.
Did your daughter come out that night?
Yes, ma'am, she did, after I had to even request for a supervisor. My daughter, the officers that showed up did not even they didn't escort my daughter out of the house. My daughter was upstairs. There's a 2-level home. My daughter did not even want to come out from the room that she was in upstairs. She wanted to be escorted down by the officers because the room where the abuse happened is my old bedroom. I lived in that house with them when they moved there in 1997. So I know the layout of the house. The abuse where my mother was being physically kept every day was my old bedroom, and also my oldest granddaughter's, her bedroom once I moved out. And so I know the layout of the house. So I know my daughter that was in the house at the time, she was upstairs in a den area. That's where she was sleeping for the night. So she wanted to be escorted from that den upstairs through the front door, because that room is by the front door. She was afraid to walk by the front door. And she's right here if you want to ask her what happened.
So what happened? Do you know, in your knowledge, what happened? I mean, that you observed your daughter was escorted out at some point.
Yes, ma'am.
Was your mother still there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so what about the other incident? He says you came to the house.
It was the very next day for a welfare check on my mother for obvious reasons. And in that case, I did not call the police. I wasn't even aware that other relatives chose to show up because they became aware of what happened the night before on April 23rd. So they wanted to do a welfare check on my mother the very next day, which is a Monday, April 24th. That's what that second visit by me was about. An extended relative, another relative of my mother's, these are all my mother's relatives who love and care about my mother. They called me while I was at home with all 3 of my daughters who live with me. We were at home. That extended relative called one of my daughter's phones and kept trying to get in contact with me. They wanted to speak to me. When they finally spoke to me, they said, we're headed over to your mother's home, and we want you to come with us because we want to call the police again and make sure that she's okay. Do you want to come? And I said, yes, that's my mother. Yes, I will come. So I didn't call the police that day, but I did decide and choose to come with them and meet them there, rather, because as we all met up. There were some relatives already there. I didn't know other relatives of my mother were already there. There was one relative that I met in a parking lot up the street in a plaza of a grocery store plaza, because I was under the impression that all of my mother's relatives were going to meet in that plaza.
Oh, you got muted. You just need to unmute, ma'am.
Hello?
All right, we're not on this case. Thank you. All right, Miss Huey, you need to unmute.
Relatives. So I went ahead and followed her. And we pulled up to my parents' address and there were already vehicles parked there. My daughters also came as well. They drove their vehicles.
Okay. So you deny any threats to your father?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And did you have, since it's been testified to, did you have any conversations with law enforcement and the medical examiner about her death?
I did have conversations, being that I'm my mother's only biological daughter. Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
The reason I spoke with the medical examiner, I called because, for one, I wasn't even notified the day that my mother passed away, which was June 8th. I found out through a third party. An extended relative called me after 5 o'clock, almost 6 o'clock in the evening, to let me know my mother had passed hours earlier on that day. No one called me. The petitioner didn't call me. My oldest daughter didn't call me. No one called me to let me know. I was unaware that my mother had a medical emergency, was even taken to the hospital, much less pronounced dead. So the very next morning, which was June 9th, I did call the medical examiner's office because no one was letting me know anything. It was intentionally trying to keep me out of the loop, trying to keep me uninformed about my mother. And I did call the medical examiner's office because I wanted the medical examiner office to be aware that there was an active adult protective services case on my mother. And I have the letter to prove it, which I submitted as my evidence.
Okay. Madam Clerk, can you pull that up for me, please, ma'am? So have you gotten any follow-up from that, ma'am? You can take it down, Madam Clerk. Thank you.
No, ma'am, I did not. And that is my qualm with APS.
So this was before, hold on, this was before your mother passed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I filed the report from my mother on April 26th. I received that letter on May 3rd, just a few days later, confirming that I had a case for her.
Okay.
And also, ma'am, I'm sorry, the incident where I had to go get my daughter, call 911 and go get my daughter on April 23rd, I also submitted the video, the audio recording of that as evidence as well. And that really needs to
Okay,
be heard.
we can
That's
pull that
all.
up. Madam Clerk, do you see an audio recording in there?
Just one moment, please. It's loud as, I guess it's the way she said it. I'm trying it.
It gets louder. Your
Okay.
Honor.
So you might need to be prepared to turn it down then, depending on what happens.
That's it, Your Honor.
You messed up three of them things last week like that. This people sent you free more than anything on $200 a piece. Don't take this.
I didn't do anything to you. Somebody help me.
You see this right here?
Please help me.
Don't you take this off. You see this right? Don't take it off. Don't get the hand away from me.
Son of a bitch, you ain't gonna get on me. I did not do anything to you.
I'm so
I did not do anything to you. I know you did
Don't you
anything.
take this. Don't you take this off your arm anymore. Don't you take this off your arm. You're lying to me.
Son of a bitch, you ain't gonna do me like this. I know you're going to jail. You're going to jail, not me. You're going to jail. You will not hit on me like that.
Don't you take this off your arm anymore. These things off $200 a piece. You can't keep missing these things off your arm. Don't take it over off. Don't take this off your arm. You see this thing. You ripped this off your arm. Who did? There's a tape right there.
I didn't do it.
There's a tape right there where I put it. I put that thing on your arm, put two rolls of tape right. You had yanked it off. I put this on your arm, and you better not. I better not take your hand on this. You better not touch this. You understand this? Do you understand this? I said you don't touch this monitor. And these things cost $200 a piece. I ain't got no way to check your blood sugar now. Your blood sugar goes up back. Don't worry, but you done ripped the darn thing off, and you ain't got no way to check your blood sugar. I told you tore three of those things last week. I spent 3 days.
I don't do that.
I spent on 3 days begging those people to give you another one of these. And they sent you 3 more. And now you're going to sit there and start ripping them off of me. If you take a note like you put on work, you take a note off and see what happens next time. You better not touch this thing. Don't touch it. You hear what I said? Don't touch it. I put this on your arm. These things cost $200 each, and you can't keep flipping these things off your own. You take it. You tore three of these things last week, three of them. These things will last you 14 days. You done messed up a whole 6 weeks supply in 3 days. Now you're going to do the same thing again this week. You're not going to do this again. You know better. I told you one time, don't change it now. I double take the thing so we can run after you rip this thing.
All right, so, oh, it's still going, okay.
I'm not putting another one on you now. That's 4 of those things. You done messed up the one you took over for $200 each. You can't keep ripping those things off your arm like that.
So is this video your daughter that was in the house?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Is she here?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Before I call her, we can take this one down. Is there any anything else you want me to know about the allegations? Have you threatened your father in any way, his physical safety?
No, ma'am.
All right. We can bring your daughter in,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
one who recorded. Did you say 15?
No,
18. Okay, that's okay. All right. There was a video that was just played. Was that a video that you took inside a house?
Yes.
All right. Who are the voices that I hear that we can hear on that audio?
The abuser and my grandmother,
Okay. And by the abuser, who are you talking about?
my grandfather,
And what is your grandfather's name?
Bobby Huey.
Okay. And at one point, it sounded like someone yelled, "Someone help me." Who was that at that time?
My grandmother.
All right. So that night that were you there when you eventually ended up, did you call the police that night?
No, it
You
was
called your mom, is that right?
I called
Okay.
my sister first. Yes.
Okay. And why did you call your sister?
Hmm?
Why did you
Okay.
call your sister?
Because she was the first person on my mind to call, because I knew that she would tell my mom immediately, and I wanted my mom to come and to get me.
Okay. And what happened that night? Like tell me, why don't you just take me through briefly? You don't have to give all the details, but kind of how you came to be recording at that point.
I was unwinding from the day. I was in the bathroom. The bathroom is up on the level, sort of adjacent to the room that they were in. And just doing the normal things I do when I get off work, I heard yelling and cursing and stopping and stuff because I had the door closed. And I slowly opened the door, and I heard my grandfather yelling at my grandmother, yelling about a diabetic monitor, and he was accusing her of taking it off and messing with it. And then when I started to hear him say, "You better not take off that D monitor," I started recording. I immediately rushed to my phone and started recording. And I tried to record as much as I can until my phone said no more storage. And I was shaking, scared. Sorry.
It's okay. Let me ask you this. So you called for somebody to intervene.
Yes.
At some point, were you able to get out of the house?
Yes, I was able to get up because I just finally ran out, because the officer, he didn't escort me out. He wasn't trying to see where I was. He was just in the house talking to the petitioner. And the petitioner was walking all around the house trying to find me, but I just wanted to know an officer was present so that I know I was safe walking out. And so when he came upstairs, he finally opened the closet, because I had my hand on the knob of the linen closet, just in case, before the police showed up or anything, in case he did try to do anything if he found me. And so I got out the house when he finally opened the door, when the police and my mom was there and everything. when he opened the door, he said, "What are you doing here?" I just immediately ran out. The officer was still downstairs by the front door, and he just looked at me, and I just ran straight to my mom, and I gave her a hug, and yes.
Did you hear your mom yelling at any point? Any threats to the petitioner?
No.
All right. Miss Huey, the respondent, do you have any questions you want to ask her? She can come in here and let me know if there's any other questions she wants to ask you.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Sir, do you have any questions of this witness that just testified, your granddaughter? And you need to unmute. And remember, this isn't a time to argue. This is the time to ask any specific factual questions about what she's testified to. Okay. And you just,
Yes.
there we go. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Paris, you said
No,
that,
don't say you. Say just tell me what question to ask her, kind of third person, and
Okay.
I'll ask her. So
Okay.
you aren't going back and forth.
the police officer were in the house there for several minutes. They asked me, was anybody in the house? The police officer and I both were looking for Paris. We didn't know.
So hold
she was
on,
in-
you're testifying now. You'll have a chance to come back and tell me what you want me to know about this, but this is a
okay.
question. So what's the question you want me to ask her?
Okay. I asked her, how long has she been living in staying in my house before that night?
Okay. Paris, how long have you been staying in that house before that night?
Before the incident, only because of the car accident I had, it was the only reason why I was over there. But as far as visits and normal family things, that's it. I've never.
No, that's fine. But just tell me. I understand you may have
Oh,
reasons, but just
okay.
tell me how.
I mean, spending the night.
Hold on.
Actually,
How long?
okay.
Hold on, sir. How long had you been staying at the house, spending the night at that house before this happened?
I'd say about a month,
Okay.
about a couple of weeks.
I got evidence she was there since October.
So again, you'll have a time to testify. Do you have any other questions for her? You're muted again.
My question, I want to ask her about something she said. She said she was afraid and to come out of the house. I want to ask her, was there only one way out of that house? She said she went out the front door. Ask her, was there any other way from where she was hiding that she could have left that house without encountering me?
Okay.
Actually, did she know of any other way out of that house?
Okay. Ma'am, is there any other way out of that house that you could have left at that time without encountering him?
Really? Not really, because he's all over the house. He's always walking around, just around the house. So even if I were trying to escape, quote unquote, he would have said something or probably done something. And so that's why I didn't want to get out of that room.
That's not my point.
Oh, hold on. Let her finish.
Until
Go
I
ahead.
knew and law enforcement were there and my mother was there, I did not want to come out. And I
So
didn't-
there's more than one way to exit the house, I think is what he was trying to get at. Not saying whether you felt that you could, but is there multiple entrances and exits to that house?
Yes, but there's also an alarm. So
Okay, that's fine. All right, sir, do you have any other questions for her? You're on mute, so you got to unmute again. You need to unmute, sir.
Recall or remember staying in my house almost every night from October 22 to the night of this incident.
Okay.
Does she recall staying in my house for that period of time?
Okay, I'll ask this question. If she doesn't give you the answer you want, then you're kind of stuck with that answer for the moment, okay? You can't keep asking the
All right.
questions. All right,
All
ma'am,
right.
do you recall staying overnight at that house almost every night since October of 2022?
no, ma'am.
Okay, so her answer is no.
Okay.
And I understand you dispute that, and you can let the court know that in just a moment. Any other questions for her about what she testified to?
I'm trying to recall what she said. One other thing, yes. Before that night, had she ever observed or witnessed me either saying or doing anything abusive to my wife, Vivian, before that night? Does she recall any other incident?
Okay, ma'am, do you, before that night, do you recall any other previous incident of your grandfather being abusive to his wife?
Absolutely. There's been many times where he has yelled at her, cussed at her in front of our faces, behind closed doors. It's an ongoing thing.
Okay. Any other questions, sir?
Not for her, but I do with
Okay,
her mother.
yeah, I'll give you a chance to ask. Okay, all right, ma'am, thank you. If your mother could take her place back. All right, Miss Huey, I need to give Mr. Huey a chance to ask you any questions about what you've testified to. So, sir, do you have, remember again, this isn't the time for argument or telling your side of things. It's the time to ask any questions that you might think would be helpful to your case. So do you have any questions you would like me to ask her about what she has testified to?
Yes.
All right. What are
the
those
first one? My first question is, how many times has she been out to the house to visit her mother or call her mother in the last 10 years?
Okay.
Actually,
all right. Given that there's been some testimony about abuse occurring, this may or may not be relevant to whether she has committed an act of family violence against you, but since some of it has been testified to, I will ask that question. How many times have you come out to visit your mother in the past 10 years?
Lots of times. The most recent time was 2022. When I have a picture, I should have submitted that as evidence, when I asked both the petitioner and my mother, would they like, I was fixing food, I like to cook and fix different types of cuisine. And I asked them, I told them what I was cooking that day, and it was Caribbean cuisine. And I asked them if they would like for me to bring them a plate. I had more than enough to share, and that I would bring some over. And I did that day, and that was last summer.
Okay.
Last July.
Any other questions, sir?
how many times has she called her mother on the telephone, either for birthday, mother, or just to call her, see how she was doing in the last 10 years? How many times has she called and spoke to her mother in the last 10 years?
Okay, I'll allow this question, and then we're going to start straying off if we get too much into the relationship. I can see what each side is presenting. Ma'am, how many times have you called and spoken to your mother in the last 10 years?
Hardly ever, because the cell phone that was in my mother's name and has been for a long period of time has been controlled by and answered by the petitioner. So there's no reason for me to call my mother's cell phone because it's going to be answered by him. And even the landline, communication with my mother has been very controlled. And so by the petitioner for many years. So that's why I haven't called my mother, and I don't call my mother, and she hasn't been allowed to use a cell phone for many, many years, even though there's a cell phone in her name. A number for it, but he keeps the cell phone with him for many, many years. That is a known fact in our family.
Okay. All right, sir. Any other questions? And again,
Yes.
getting into whether he's actually abused her or not is not really what's before the court at this time.
Yes,
So-
one last question.
Go ahead.
Does she recall the last time she came to my home to see my granddaughter Takaya? Does she recall slapping Takaya while she was holding her baby in her hand, and the police had to be called on her that night when her baby was 6 months old?
Let me ask you that. Hold on, sir. Hold on. Were you present and did you witness this?
Yes, I witnessed. I called the police. I had to drag her out of my house.
So you called the
came
police
out
on her. Okay. So, sir, ma'am, do you recall the last time you came to his home slapping Takaya?
No, because the last time I came to his home was last year in 2022 to drop off brown stew chicken plates for him and my mother.
Was there any time you were at his house when he called the police on you for slapping somebody?
No, he never called the police. And the incident that he's referring to happened in 2019, fall of 2019.
Okay.
That was a police report. That was a 911 report.
Okay.
Because I called
Well,
police.
2019, that's not against someone else is not necessarily, it gives me background, but it's not going to turn on whether she's committed acts against family violence against you in these recent allegations in your petitions.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, on that Monday when she called, did you not say, did you not say to me 3 or 4 times that I was dead while you were yelling out there in the cul-de-sac in front of my home, yelling and cursing? Did you not tell me that I was dead at least 3 or 4 times?
Okay. So, ma'am, did you not yell? And I think I already asked you that when you first testified, but did you not yell at your father while you were yelling and cursing in the cul-de-sac? You're dead 3 or 4 times.
I told him God was going to dead him. Yes, ma'am. I said God was going to dead him.
You said God was going to dead him?
Yes, ma'am.
I asked you, did you say that I was dead? I asked her, did she say I was dead? Yes or no?
No, I did not.
So, stop. You asked if she said you are dead.
Yes.
And that was my question. And her answer was no. She said God was going to dead you, is what she said. So that question has been asked and answered.
Okay. Well, it should be in the police report because the 2 police officers walked out right behind there. So that was a police report made that day and the night before. And
did you submit those police reports into evidence, sir?
I tried to get them. That's what I wanted to get, those police, because that was 2 officers that night and a supervisor on the night before 2 more police officers came out that next day. So they were there when all of this went on. And,
That's what I heard, but I heard you said that she was threatening you. The police reports say that you said she was saying that, or did they say?
No, see what happened, she was out there yelling, telling me I was dead. I was standing in my front door. The police officer was in there with my wife. I stepped inside and told the police officer, I said, she's out here threatening me. That's when the police officer told me to get my phone, turn it on, and record her. And that's what I did.
And that's what I remember. And you said that you did not get those threats on the recording, given the timing.
Yeah, I actually repeated. She would repeat it after she saw me with the cell phone.
Okay. All right. Okay. Anything else you want me to know, sir? And I'll let you know. I'm
Yes. Also, in addition to the police officers, 2 different police visits out here. I guess adult protective service. They sent an investigator out here about a week later. She came out here and did just like police officers. She came in, put me aside, talked to my wife, examined her from head to toe, and so she wrote up a report. And I told her, just for the record, I said, you may come to my house unannounced anytime you wish. I said, you won't get any opposition from me. So what I'm saying is, I had police officers come out to my house that Sunday night, that Monday, and the adult protective services came out here, and they all came out here and wrote reports. And even the police officers that came out here that night, they examined her. One of a female police officer.
so again, I'm not deciding whether you've abused your wife or not.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying.
And you're saying the police department came out twice. The adult protective services came out,
and they examined her from head to toe.
Did they tell you if the case? Do you know if the case was closed before your wife passed or not?
As far as I know, because I didn't hear anything back from them.
You hadn't heard anything back yet. Okay.
No.
All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I've heard from witnesses. 2 witnesses say there were no threats. 1 witness says there was. Calling the police on someone on its own is not an act of family violence. These are very heated, hostile situations, and I just sincerely hope things get better from here. But slander and libel, saying someone did something on their own, that might be something that you can sue someone for in another court, but it's not necessarily an act of family violence if they believe what they are accusing. And it sounds like that was not even posted on a social media post technically by this respondent. Additionally, I don't have enough evidence to find that an act of family violence has been committed by a preponderance of the evidence, and that there's a future reasonable likelihood, especially given that it was dismissed and then refiled, and the petitioner stated he initially really just refiled to prevent her from coming to the funeral. So at this point, I'm going to dismiss the ex parte order. That does not mean that someone cannot file again in the future if there are any further acts that might qualify as family violence, threats, harassment, intimidation, or otherwise. But under the evidence that was presented today, I don't have enough to find by that preponderance burden. But as I said, you can refile in the future if necessary. And if there's any crimes committed, the police may be called. But at this time, that's going to be the court's ruling, and you all are excused. And I do thank you for your time today.